Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Nyesom. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, a firestorm erupts in Nigeria's political world between two frontline governors, one that's turned what analysts say has been a simmering Cold War into a hot conflict. The fragile thread that held the relationship between David Umahi and Nyesom Wike together has snapped, and it's done so on Arise News. We'll bring you the best and worst moments of that very public spat, and we'll analyse what the fallout is likely to be for the opposition People's Democratic Party and the ruling All Progressives Congress. And later, the war in Ethiopia's northern Tigray province deepens. It's not only threatening to turn into a regional conflict, it's also now ensnaring the highest profile Tigrayan abroad, with Ethiopia's army chief accusing the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, of lobbying in favor of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is fighting federal troops, and of helping to get them weapons. We'll have analysis of the current state of the fighting in Ethiopia coming up. First, to the increasingly fraught relationship between Governor David Umahi of Ebonyi State in the southeast and Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State in the south-south region. It's a simmering Cold War that has now turned into a hot, very public conflict following Governor Umahi's decision to deflect from the opposition People's Democratic Party to the ruling All Progressives Congress. It was always a thin thread, one that's been under threat and enormous strain for months. Sooner or later, it was certain to break. Unfortunately for the PDP, which has tried to contain both men for a long time, it snapped at this moment, and in a very public way, on Arise Television News.
Wike must know that he's a dictator. Wike must know that, one person cannot be called a crowd. And Wike must know that a lot of governors in PDP are very sad with him. He remote controls the party, and he said that I made my brother the vice chairman of PDP Southeast. I fund the Southeast, PDP from A to Z. And he has forgotten that, he single-handedly made Secondus the PDP chairman. He has forgotten that he wanted to also impose, one of his own as the minority leader in the House of Rep.
It's unfortunate. I am not at the level of Governor Umahi. He said, I single-handedly imposed Secondus. That is an indictment on him. How did I? Secondus from my state, and he wants to run election. I came to him, please support Secondus. I went round to all the governors, please support this man. All of them agreed, even including Umahi, that when Secondus was the National Organizing Secretary, that Secondus stood by them, and therefore they were going to support Secondus. It does not tell you a ban, so which means I said, Umahi, you must support Secondus. And the Umahi, who is supposed to be a governor of a state, without thinking, now went to the convention and said, Wike said, I should support Secondus. Wike flogged him, and he went and supported Secondus. You can imagine the kind of governor you are talking about. There's nothing wrong. And I won't apologize to anybody. If somebody from Rivers State wants to run an election, I have to go and talk to my colleagues why we should support this person.
He must know that there is nothing that happens in PDP without his authorization. He must know that he said that the PDP working committee members are beggars and armed robbers and the bribe takers. He has called them all kinds of unprintable names. And I have asked Governor Wike, who is my friend, let's not take on ourselves, because it will be very dangerous for us to take on ourselves.
Now, he also said, I must control the NWC. At the same time, he said, they are armed robbers. They are this. The people I'm controlling, I'm the one controlling them, according to him. And the same person also saying that they are armed robbers. The point must be made, and one man who will tell you one thing today, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night. I do not go say one thing this morning, in the night, I say different thing. Umahi has shown the kind of character is made of. Let me just tell you one thing. I said some members of NWC are tax collectors. Some members of NWC are tax collectors. I said so, and that's the stuff some of us are made up of. I never said NWC are tax collectors. So,
Governor Wike, and we also heard from Governor Umahi. Well, for analysis of this latest political upheaval in Nigeria, I'm joined now from our overflow studio by the lawyer, public affairs analyst, and member of the opposition PDP, Anthony Ehilebo, and with me in our main studio, the legal practitioner and member of the UK's Lincoln Inn, Daniel Bwala, who's also a governance analyst and former senatorial aspirant under the ruling APC. I'll start with you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And you were having a bit of a guffaw, a bit of a laugh there while that was going on. I mean, a very public spat indeed between two influential governors, David Umahi and Nyesom Wike. How has this latest blow up between the two gone down in Nigeria's political world?
Thank you for having me. You know, as I watch the back and forth between them, which is what the Americans would classify as the food fight, you know, is interesting, but at the same time can be said to be sad, in the sense that whatever decisions they make, it will affect not just their immediate constituency, which is the states, but now it's going to affect their respective parties, because David Umahi coming to APC to me is not just a movement by accident. You know, as someone who is actively involved in the activities of the APC, he would want the world to know that he simply moved because he felt injustice. So, in a nutshell, listening to both of them, there is a bit of a truth on both sides. There's a bit of a not truth on both sides, and then a misleading information. So, probably in the course of the interview, we may have to look at it. Now, let me start with one.
Well, let me just ask you this quickly, because you made a very interesting point about what Governor Umahi's defection is going to mean. I mean, is it likely to be beneficial or less so? Because in doing that, I mean, in making new friends apparently in the APC, he's left behind a lot of enemies in the PDP.
Right. So I am one who believes that he has always had the friends in APC, which now supports one of the claims of Governor Wike that he has been romancing with APC. I've always known him as one who has a soft spot for APC all of these times and has been supportive of the president. So what I considered from the other side is that I see in him someone who is a bridge builder, who wants to be nationalistic, who does not want to be involved in this friction, so to speak, which is completely outside of politics, you know, between APC and PDP. But in the real sense of it, he has created enemies, especially because the premise on which he left, as is canvassed now in the public space, is one that has cast aspersion on people like, you know, Wike, and then quite a number of them are going to come up.
And also on the PDP.
And on the PDP as well. Now, part of what he is saying that may not be true, even though I'm not a member of PDP, is this fact that PDP has not been fair to the Southeast. Now, everyone knows that the Southeast are the biggest beneficiaries of the PDP administration over these years, in terms of position, in terms of relationship, even in terms of influence, which is what Governor Wike tried to tell the world. That, look, tell us you are moving because you have a personal ambition, but not because of what you are saying, that the Southeast is being marginalized. Now, in politics, this is my view. Politics is not like going to a supermarket. And so even if someone comes to the media space and say, I'm moving to this party not because of this, not because of that. People who understand the dynamics of politics, they don't judge by what you say. Right. There are moves. It's like a chess game where you look at the position, where you look at the force, where you look at the dynamics of movement, you see calculation. And if you're judging on the basis of that, then you will agree with the point of Wike that the move is looking at 2023
Okay, let me ask you to just stay with us. Let me bring in the Anthony Ehilebo, who is in our overflow studio, and he is a public affairs analyst. He's a lawyer and member of the opposition PDP. Thank you for staying with us. And as the two governors launch their particularly scathing attacks against each other with all the hostility they could possibly muster, I'm sure you saw that clip. I mean, it seems to be like, it seems like the PDP is going to be the worse for it, doesn't it? I mean, because it suggests a lot of internecine squabbling going on there in the party, lots of sort of cracks and divisive elements there.
Well, good afternoon, or good evening as it is now. I'd like to disagree with you that there are cracks within the PDP. I mean, before I came here, I was just at the 90th NEC meeting, National Executive Council meeting of the PDP. And I can tell you for a fact that every PDP governor was at that meeting. Any PDP governor you want to name was at that meeting. Governor Udom from Akwa Ibom, Ayade from Cross River, the Southeast governors, Ugwai for Enugu, and Governor Ikpeazu from Abia State. So I can tell you there are no cracks within the PDP. What has happened is that someone has looked at the political future and decided that he best make his bed with fellows that he feels more comfortable with, which is the APC. But in hindsight, or when one thinks about it, how do you leave a party that is settled, a party that has a functional national working committee, for a party that doesn't seem to even have the committee that is supposed to manage the party in affairs that has his house in order, doesn't have a functional BOT. I mean, throughout this week, PDP has had several of its organs having meetings. So when Governor Umahi, who has left the party, and who we've always had a suspicion that he's not.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Ehilebo. I'll come straight back to you, but I've just been told I've got to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the latest political upheaval in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, it could be argued that Governors David Umahi and Nyesom Wike are or were among the two biggest political features in the opposition People's Democratic Party. Umahi has, of course, now left for the ruling All Progressives Congress. They both tower over politics in the southeast and south-south regions, with both dominating almost a third of the political landscape in southern Nigeria. But now some say that Governor Umahi's defection to the ruling APC party has irrevocably changed the equation and political calculation in the PDP, whilst reinvigorating the political space in Nigeria as the country inches towards the 2023 presidential ballot. Certainly from the look of things as they panned out on Arise News on Wednesday, or perhaps I should say detonated on Arise News between Umahi and Wike, the explosion looks like it's going to resonate for a while.
My position is that this PDP we are talking about, I don't know about APC. APC in 2023 would have stayed 28 years. You know, it is very obvious that we have not really supported APC in Southeast. But I'm talking about a place, the home, you know, the community, you know, that we have supported. We are part of the founding, members of it. In fact, our, elder statesman, Alex Ekweme, His Excellency, was the major breakthrough, for the birth of this PDP. And I'm saying, what is wrong? Don't we have anybody that since 1998 going to 2023, we cannot be asked to fly the ticket? It's an insult on the collective sense of the Igbos. It's very, very insulting. And nobody is talking to me to stay back that has been able to convince me. What is wrong by convening a NEC meeting to say, yes, we are talking of justice. let us give Southeast, the opportunity.
The governor of Ebonyi should be honest to tell Nigerians that we are all intelligent people. When you see what is going on, you know where it's coming from. He told me, and I spoke to him. I said, listen, PDP, we have to sit down. Presidency of Nigeria is not by you saying, I will be president. It has to do with everybody in the party sitting down and looking at the pros and cons. And so, okay, yes, we think that the Southeast should have it. That's what is done. It's not because you are interested, and therefore, you say, look, you will not. But if you watch, he said in his interview and even broadcast that he was leaving politics in 2023. So when is he going to fight to realize the injustice against the people of the Southeast?
Governor Wike, and before him, Governor Umahi. And with me from our Overflow studio, the lawyer, public affairs analyst, and member of the opposition PDP, Anthony Ehilebo. And with me in our main studio, the legal practitioner and member of the UK's Lincoln Inn, Daniel Bwala, who's also a governance analyst and former senatorial aspirant under the ruling APC. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. And let me go straight away to you, Mr. Ehilebo. I apologize for interrupting you the last time, but we had to get to a break. And amid all this bucking of heads, as it were, the nettlesome question of Igbo presidency still looming in the background. Do you think all this is bringing it more to the front burner? And if so, is it all good or bad for the cause of an Igbo presidency? A dark cloud or a silver lining from your assessment?
Well, first of all, I have to go back to the point that Wike and Governor Umahi have personal issues. I think Governor Wike was only speaking the position of the party, not that he took a personal whip at Governor Umahi. That should be said. And in the interest of all Nigerians, PDP is a party that's built on nationalism. It's built on the fact that no one person owns the party. A case in point, Governor Wike was supporting Aminu Waziri Tambuwal in the 2019 presidential election primaries, and he didn't succeed. The primaries instead picked the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar as his candidate. And this was in Port Harcourt. So this tells you that the party, PDP, has a mind of its own, has a way it sees and thinks about issues before it takes a position. Not one person can decide the fate of the party. No one man can decide, sit down somewhere and say, I own PDP, therefore I'm going to tell PDP what to do. I've been in party for a very long time, and I can tell you I've never seen it happen. I've never seen one man with the capacity to put PDP in his pocket. Even Obasanjo could not do it. He was unable to get a third term. And that tells you how strong the party, in terms of the spread, in terms of how its national outlook is. Back to the question on if an Igbo presidency or Southeast presidency is something the PDP is thinking about. Don't forget that in 2019, our vice presidential candidate was from the Southeast, whereas the APC vice presidential candidate was from the Southwest. So how much more closer to the presidency was the Southeast? And I'm sure that moving forward, if there's a general consensus that this part of the country has not enjoyed presidency, then we might as well be thinking about it. But there are other regions in the country we have not had a taste of the Northeast certainly has not been given that opportunity to have a president in Nigeria within the 1999 to 2020 political experiment period.
Okay, but let me ask you this, Mr. Ehilebo. Do you think Governor Umahi has succeeded at the very least in moving the issue of Igbo presidency to the top of the mainstream agenda in Nigerian political circles, rather than it remaining in the political margins, as it were?
I doubt if it was ever in the margins. I doubt the fact that the region wants presidency. I mean, every region, like I said, there's the Northeast that has not had presidency. They too can have an agitation for presidency. But however, it has to be a collective decision. Because even if you give the Southeast presidency today, and they do not have support of the other critical regions of the country, they'll never achieve that presidency. So there must be a plan, there must be a process to which they achieve this agenda that we so think that in the interest of equity should go to them. But however, for a man to unilaterally dump a party that has given him so much, he's had so much leverage with the political party called PDP, even as someone from the Southeast, he has benefited immensely from the party. So it cannot be said that the PDP does not have opportunities for the Southeast or does not in any way contemplate zoning its presidency to the Southeast. But however, PDP doesn't zone its presidency to a particular region. What it does is either it goes north or it goes south. And it leaves it open for that particular region to produce
Right, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you there because I want to bring in Daniel Bwala before we take a break. Let's just shift a little bit away from the PDP to the APC. Do you see within all this the seeds of a sort of political revival being sown in the APC, the injection of this new sort of positive life into the party, or more conflict with the arrival of David Umahi there?
I think it's a bit of both. Let me start with the revival. I think it's a good news that amidst this turmoil, we're hearing that people from the Southeast, leaders from the Southeast of that caliber coming to the APC, and people having the impression that there is likely going to be a conversation and probably actualization of the zoning to the Southeast. So it's going to be a revival because you're going to find a lot of Southeastern people who may be in PDP, they may tilt towards that if it is true. I also believe that being a governor, David Umahi, cannot just make a move like that if there is no reasonable ground for him to have received some kind of promise, and not just from anybody, but reasonable people.
Although he's denying it vehemently.
But that's
you're a politician, I bet you. Well, you're a partial politician.
As a matter of fact, if as a politician you quickly accept that, that is going to be the recipe for disaster. Because the idea is that should be the last thing you bring out of the card.
Yeah, but the thing, of course, about Nigerian politics is that it turns very often, doesn't it? Depending on which way the wind is blowing.
Right.
So you could well be given a promise now, but closer to the time everything changes. I mean, there have been a lot of very frustrated people leaving both parties because of that.
In fact, I even hold the view that even if it is the president that personally gives him the assurance that he's coming to APC, there is no guarantee that he will get it.
Okay, let me ask you to just stay with us. I'll come straight back to you. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the latest political upheaval in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Enyegolu, and this is the way our sister media, This Day newspaper, reported the clash between what it called the two gladiators of Nigerian politics. The paper says Governors Umahi and Wike came out smoking over the defection of Umahi from the opposition PDP to the ruling APC. While Governor Umahi insisted that he deserted the PDP in the interest of the Southeast and to force the PDP to redress what he called its shabby treatment of the region, Wike contended that the action was taken purely in pursuit of the selfish interest and personal ambition of the Ebonyi State governor, who he says wants to run for the presidency in 2023 on the platform of the APC. And of course, they both aired their views rather heatedly on Arise News, clips of which you saw earlier on this program. And with me from our Overflow studio, the lawyer, public affairs analyst, and member of the opposition PDP, Anthony Ehilebo. And with me in our main studio, the legal practitioner and member of the UK's Lincoln Inn, Daniel Bwala, who is also a governance analyst and former senatorial aspirant under the ruling APC. And I'll come straight back to you. Apologies for interrupting you earlier. But we were talking about this with Mr. Ehilebo before we went on a break. And just to put it another way, after many years in the wilderness, is the idea of an Igbo presidency now fueling both the popular and the political imagination in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think it is. Although a lot will depend on how the stakeholders in the Southeast play the politics, especially because, for example, not long ago, when this violence and crisis that erupted from Lagos, and then you have one in Port Harcourt that was alleged to have been instigated by Nnamdi Kanu. So how they manage Nnamdi Kanu going forward will be very pivotal. And then secondly, political participation in all political parties. I think that I may be wrong, but over time, the politics that stakeholders from the Southeast are playing, which has not been helpful, is that they concentrate themselves into one political party. So when they lose out completely, which is not what you find in the North.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, in the North, they will make sure they spread across all political parties, so that even if they are very dominant here and they lose out, they will still have some portion of their people in this party who will stay part of the government. Now, that conversation is fresh. I believe that conversation will not dominate the front burner in the coming days. And it is also a pointer. That's what I said, that I don't just take the movement of Governor Umahi as just a movement. Otherwise, if it was on the premise of the crisis as he alleged, he would have moved to the party last year. Because that was around time when Wike's dominance on the PDP, and I disagree with the fellow you have in your studio. Wike controls the party, everyone knows. I mean, it's not something that you dispute, it's a fact. So that time would have been the time Governor Umahi would have left the party, especially because he also had his conflict with Peter Obi.
And he controls the party because he's got a lot more money than everyone else.
That's one.
Right.
And then two, he cannot also deny the fact that he has 2023 ambition. You see, all these things are possibilities.
Do you have 2023? I'm getting suspicious now. Does he have 23? Does he have 20?
I think he does. But you know, this is my point. As he moved to the party, as a member of APC, to me, it is not just so fast. It's not so fast that because you move to the party, you make the assumption, or people making the assumption that he will get the ticket. There are Igbo, that is people from the Igbo extraction in APC who laid their lives for the success of APC in the East. When APC was considered as Islamic party, they were being addressed as supporters of Islamic extremism. There are quite a number of them who are in APC. Are we suggesting that the movement of a governor from a PDP just coming into the party overnight means that the effort of these individuals are going to be thrown? They may have built structures and friendship and alliance. That is one part of the argument. The second part of the argument is whether APC, this is the second time APC is going to be faced with the test to show whether they believe in party loyalty. If there is any problem that APC has, which is the advantage of PDP over APC, and I can say that anytime, any day, is that PDP reward their people. PDP have a way of showing support for people who lay their lives or put in efforts for the success of their party. In APC, it is a case, I would use that local parlance, of monkey walk, baboon chop. It doesn't matter your effect, your input in the party. Anything can happen in the political party. A good example is Godswill Akpabio. He came into the party in the midnight. By the morning, he took over the entire Niger Delta. And there were individuals who were classified and categorized as Islamic extremists during this period of this party, whatever, Bwala. But now he appears to be leading and cutting the shots in that place. So that is why people have a feeling that it's also possible for Governor Umahi to come in and get a ticket. What I suspect, I may be wrong, and I'm not quoting anyone, is that the ticket Governor Umahi may be interested in is vice presidential ticket. That's my suspicion.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I've heard that aired in a number of places, and you've actually answered, because I was going to ask you, you've got a lot of feelers out there with people in the APC and so on, whether or not you thought that, or you think that, or you can give us a sense of the way people are likely to react to a presidential ticket from somebody like Mr. Umahi. But then you've answered that question to some extent, because you think it's likely to be vice presidential. So let me bring Mr. Ehilebo in. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. All this, of course, as we mentioned earlier, is focusing a lot of attention on the Southeast, and if nobody knew about the presidential ambition of people there, then probably everybody does now. I mean, how much is that likely to be celebrated in the Southeast? I mean, should it be something that ought to be celebrated there?
Well, I would be celebrating if Governor Umahi had moved with his federal lawmakers. It's unfortunate that no lawmaker, I'm sure you saw the press conference the Ebonyi State Caucus of the National Assembly gave yesterday and said they were not going anywhere and that the governor's move, he's on his own. Having said that, I must go back to respond to my friend that says everybody knows Governor Wike owns PDP. I reminded him about 2019 when Governor Wike was solidly behind Governor Aminu Waziri Tambuwal and he didn't succeed. You see, if you don't understand PDP, some of us have been in this party and we can tell you about the party itself. The party is not controlled by one man. The machinery of the party is such that you cannot control the party as one man. You must have a consensus across board. One thing perhaps Governor Wike does is he asserts himself. He makes a lot of effort for PDP. And you can't take that away from him. And that's why he has a very strong voice. But that doesn't mean that he has a stronger voice than Governor Okowa. That doesn't mean he has a stronger voice than Governor Udom, who are also governors in their own right. I take reservation when you say Governor Umahi is a gladiator in the political space. Prior to today, you probably wouldn't even hear about him. He never attends meetings. I've never seen him influence a decision in the political space that I'm quite aware of. So I don't want us to give him so much credit that, someone that can move, and he didn't move with any member of his National Assembly. How far does that influence go? So for the Southeast, again, we must go back to fairness and equity. Like I said, if indeed we find a worthy person that has a consensus, that has built a bridge across borders, and he's fit for purpose as a presidential candidate, and indeed goes to the primaries, because whatever we decide as a zoning, it's only a conventional agreement. It still has to go to primaries, where everybody across the country casts a vote to decide who becomes a presidential candidate. So I think it's too early in the day for anyone to start allotting positions or assigning positions based on where they think the presidency should come from. Everybody has a legitimate right to want to be president of Nigeria. And that's what indeed the PDP as a political establishment seeks to create, or seeks the opportunity it seeks to give everyone, that everybody can aspire to be. After all, no one expected President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan to become president. But he was president of this country, a minority. No one has said that PDP didn't zone presidency to the South-South. But indeed, when it was time, they availed him that opportunity. And I so do believe that the Southeast of Nigeria has been an integral, like Governor Umahi admitted, it has been one part that has been favored by the PDP. But something I must point out, going from the conversation of my learned colleague in your studio, your main studio, and the way he has spoken, you can begin to sense the kind of welcome Governor Umahi is expecting in the APC. I'm really just sitting here and wondering, does Governor Umahi know where he's going to? Does he know the sentiments of the people there? That, this man will just come from one party and jump here and we'll give him vice presidential candidate. Well, I wish him good luck. That's the best I can wish him as he goes to his new home, where people who think they deserve opportunities are waiting. Ken Namani has been in APC for a very long time. Is he going to sit back and wait for Governor Umahi to be given the yield of the efforts that he has made over the years? It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
People should have principles. And this is where some of us coming up in politics today begin to wonder the examples that are being set by people who we often think we should look up to. You should have something that you believe in. If a party has made you over the years, and then the best way you can repay it at this point in time is to defect because you have a political ambition or an inordinate ambition, as I put it, then, we wish him well wherever he has gone to.
Well, let's be quite clear that defections are part of the very DNA of Nigerian politicians. It happens on a very, very regular, very regularly indeed. And but you made some very interesting points there. So let me bring in Daniel Bwala. He talked about the fact of, David Umahi not being that really important. What's all the big deal sort of thing? But one would say that he would say that, wouldn't he, given that David Umahi's abandoned them. But looking at it objectively, and looking at both Umahi and Wike, are they both respected and looked up to by many Nigerians, or are they seen as part of the political class that's messing things up in this country?
It depends on which part of the divide that you belong to, or depending on which perspective you're looking at it. If you weigh them on a scale, I think that Governor Wike has more weight, in the sense that in PDP, for example, he is contributing largely to the success, dominance, and resistance to the ruling party by PDP. Sometimes it goes out of the normal. Some of the things that are quite not unifying, not nice, and the rest, but opposition party will welcome that. If you look at America, you can tell. While on the other hand, you have Governor Umahi, who's coming in, will interest APC because it's +1, and their own is -1. But why I'm treating that with cautious optimism is because I remember when Governor Godswill Akpabio, Senator Godswill Akpabio, moved to the APC. On the eve of his movement, we were all celebrating that we were going to have a takeover of the South-South. He was going, in fact, there was even a postulation that he was moving along with the sitting governor at the time. He moved, nobody followed. And then by the time elections came, he couldn't even deliver so much votes. I'm not saying that to denigrate him, but I'm talking about cautious optimism. And it is the same thing happening now, like my learned colleague is saying. The governor has moved, but he hasn't moved with anybody. Ordinarily would have
Well, according to the governor, when we interviewed him yesterday, he said it hasn't happened so far, but watch this space.
It's possible, it could happen, but usually when you make such a move like that, come like a tornado, right?
Yes,
you
it's
move
better
with
to
the
come, come blasting through the door, basically,
Exactly.
rather than crawling in.
Exactly.
We've got about 30 seconds.
Right.
How much has this now set in motion yet another political storm that's likely to persist for a while in Nigeria? Briefly.
Right. There will be, let me predict, the PDP, from the body language, is settling still for a candidate from the north, and most likely the northeast. So they are going to lose followership in the southeast,
Right,
if
okay.
APC should bring in a southeastern candidate.
Okay, Daniel, I want to thank you exceedingly. Daniel Bwala is a governance analyst, he's a lawyer and former senatorial aspirant under the ruling APC. And of course, from our overflow studio, Anthony Ehilebo, member of the opposition PDP, lawyer and public affairs analyst. You're watching the Arise interview, plenty more still ahead, including the latest on the deepening conflict in Ethiopia. Now, the head of the WHO is being dragged into the fray. Stay with us.